Hello, guys. This is Jerry Learns Business. We got a special guest, another Santa Monica local. So this is Sina. Sina is a lawyer from Santa Monica. So Sina, welcome.
Thank you, Jerry.
Thank you for coming on. Why don't we get started, man? What got you into law? Was that kind of like a old dream of yours, or did it kind of emerge as you started going through school?
It's funny. It's actually something that I have grown to love more as I'm doing it. I think when I was deciding what career to pursue, I was a little bit kind of lost.
Mm-hmm.
And I was born in Iran. I come from a Persian family, so like number one and number two on the list are always doctor or lawyer, right? and actually, the pressure never came from my parents, but maybe that was just how I went about thinking about it. Is like this is a secure career, and it's embarrassing to say, but I was like, I actually don't have to take like an MCAT, for example, or do all these hard science classes. So I actually kind of came into it what I would describe as the wrong way, as like I took the path of least resistance in choosing a career, which was maybe not even really choosing like from here. And I have plenty of other reasons, but if I think back on it now with perspective, it's more that I kind of wandered into being a lawyer. And I ended up, and I did well. Like I did well on the LSAT. I went to a good school. I'm a very local person. I went to UCLA for undergrad and then USC for law school. And I did well in law school, and I got a good, like, big corporate job, which we'll call like, in the legal world, we'll call it big law. And that was basically like, okay, I checked all the boxes. I got to where I was supposed to get to. And then I realized once I was there that I was like, oh man, I'm actually not into this. The people that I was working with were great. And they were polite, and I'm actually still very close friends with people that I worked with a decade ago.
Mm-hmm.
But I realized like immediately that my heart wasn't in it, and that it is a demanding job at times being a lawyer, especially if your clients are corporations. And I just realized like, oh, I have to actually figure out what I want to do now.
Mm-hmm.
So I basically, going back to what we were saying earlier, I deferred my decision on what I wanted to be when I grow up to actually when I was grown up. And it was really a pivotal time in my life as just like a person, forget like career or lawyer, but that's when I really started coming home at night and thinking about like, well, what are my passions? What is it that I want to do? And thankfully, that didn't mean that I had to completely change my career, but it did mean that I was going to have to change the path that I was on. So, like I said, I worked at a big law firm. I specialized in mergers and acquisitions at the time. So it's companies buying other companies, selling other companies. And the head of our practice area, and this is internationally, he was in our LA office, in the same office. And he was known as being an intimidating guy, like someone who really was great at what they did and had those crazy expectations for everybody else. So it wasn't uncommon to hear yelling and screaming and things like that. So I knew that when I was going to quit, that I had to go to the top and let him know that I was leaving. And that was, believe it or not, probably the scariest moment of my life, because it was now all of that conflict that I had of what am I going to do? What am I going to be? I had to now address it with someone who had completely figured that out for themselves and had rose to the very top. And so like, kind of like from a philosophical standpoint, it was an intense moment for me, but I had already made the decision that I was doing it. So I just went for a long walk the night before, and I just told myself, well, either I can approach this as a terrifying moment and some sort of like rough gauntlet that I have to pass through before getting to the next phase, or I can look at it as an opportunity to actually sit down with someone who is incredibly successful and basically use that time to help me, like, basically give me an extra boost on this next path that I'm going to go. And that's the way I ended up going into the conversation. And the funny thing was that it was immediately met with respect when I told him that. I told him, like, I can't see myself ever wanting to work my way into the place that you have found yourself. And when I said that, he said, then you should figure out what that is for you. This is not the place for you.
Yeah.
And then immediately I was like, oh, I thought he was going to yell at me and all this stuff and say, you're a loser. You're never going to make it without us. And it was totally the opposite. And he like really wished me well. He offered me my job if I ever changed my mind.
Yeah.
And then, believe it or not, I'm like, that was maybe 8 years ago. And I'm still running off of that momentum because it totally changed my perspective about, like, I just realized your perspective means so much in all of your life's decisions.
Yeah.
And when I left that firm, other people told me that they had thought about doing that stuff, but it was scary because I was getting paid very well there. And I basically didn't have much of a plan or a concrete plan on how I was going to get paid on my own. But I just told myself that if I made it this far, I could figure the rest out. Yeah. And especially if I could make that tough decision. So that transitioned into me working with a couple of my best friends from junior high. We started a small law firm doing completely different work because, as you can imagine, my experience doing mergers and acquisitions wasn't going to transition into a mom and pop.
Makes sense. Yeah. The client, like when you're doing mom and pop, you're probably not working with those big companies at the beginning, at least.
Exactly. And what was more available to us, the type of work that was more available was working with more individual clients, smaller clients. And that's where like personal injury and other consumer protection other consumer protection areas of the law, which I can talk to you a little bit more about, started becoming more available. And then plus we also were taking on the responsibilities. We were now business owners too. So we were not just lawyers, but we were also business owners. And that really started to light my fire, which you're a business owner too. And I'm sure that you have to love what you're doing if you're going to do it. And if we fast forward now to where I am, my partners and I, we split up, but we still work together on more of like a joint venture kind of, like if there's the right case to have other people involved, then we'll do that. And we're still best friends.
Makes sense. It's almost like the best arrangements. Like when we need to work together, we work together, but we're not stuck at each other's throats every day.
Yeah. And I think we bonded together, we joined together as partners originally, out of fear, out of survival instinct. We all needed, and we really did need it at the time. We needed the comfort of having two other people to bounce ideas off of. And as we each grew more confidence, we each found the different path that we really were looking for. Then it was much easier and much more comfortable actually to work solo. So that's like the longest way of saying that's when I really figured out what I wanted to do and why I wanted to be a lawyer. And now, like, to just put it really simply, the joy that I get out of it is, so I deal with people who have recently been in an accident or are facing some sort of problem. So I also do lemon law. And so they're facing big financial trouble because their car's not working and they're going up against the manufacturer who's not going to give them the time of day without somebody forcing them to. So I basically help people who are in a bad situation, so bad that they actually need to hire a professional to help them out of the situation. And then I get them across the finish line and hand them a check at the end of the whole case. Wow. And those are the two best moments. The moment when I get to actually meet the client, comfort them, build some trust, let them know that we are going to figure this out. And then at the end, proving that was the case. Like financially, that's the only way that we can actually right a wrong, unfortunately. But doing that is it's been something that I really love now.
Wow, it's awesome. I mean, there's different types of law, as you said, and I was like, the type of law you do sounds like you really get that good feeling, like I'm helping people. I'm really helping people.
Yeah, and there's plenty of stereotypes about personal injury lawyers, which I will make jokes to, and a lot of it comes from a real place because unfortunately, and it might be because it's too easy sometimes for a lot of lawyers that end up in personal injury. I shouldn't say a lot, but there are some that didn't have another option. So they flock to that because it is easier to get some cases because there are so many accidents out there. But I think the advantage or my little twist is I came from a background of doing big law, working for corporations, understanding how important customer service is, and attention to detail and professionalism. And I think putting that perspective on what I'm doing now helps to keep clients really happy and build trust. And the cool thing is they start out as a stranger, and by the end, it feels weird to tell them their case is over and that we're probably not going to talk as often as we did. But it's nice having all these different relationships with people.
Yeah. Man, I can just tell from hearing your stories that I would love to have you as a lawyer one day if I ever get into problems, because like you seem like the type of guy, it's like at the end of it, you almost want to be like, okay, well, next Christmas party, I'm inviting you.
It is cool to stay in touch with people, and hopefully you never need me. But I think the approach that I try to take with clients is, I think some clients think that as a lawyer, I never was this person. I was never the hyper aggressive, screaming type of lawyer. But I feel like instead I just kind of like maybe suffocate the situation with like calmness, you know?
Yeah.
And then it just removes all of that emotion. And I feel like some other lawyers that might be on the other side, when you don't react to something the way they want you to, then they kind of lose their ammo.
Yeah.
When you're not going to be thrown off by a statement or some surprise evidence that they just found, and you keep a poker face, then it kind of has to level them out and take away their best ammunition. So.
Yeah. Hank, who's on my channel, sometimes is very much the same. Like when someone's getting angry, he does his best not to get angry back. He just tries to. The more angry they get, the more calm. You know, it's like a good look at yin and yang.
Yeah. And I saw, I explored some of your other channels, and I saw that I think you had at least something on grappling or jiu-jitsu.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, so I'm a purple belt in jiu-jitsu.
Dude, that's awesome.
Yeah. And I think that's a lot of where I get, I see this statement, and I know it'll sound crazy, but to a certain degree, I feel like I've gotten more, jiu-jitsu has basically has played a bigger part in my legal practice than actually law school did.
Wow.
Yeah, because jiu-jitsu is like literal conflict, right? With literal conflict, you are under pressure all the time, and if you are going to be the person that's going to cave to pressure, then jiu-jitsu is not for you. You know, you're not going to survive the first day, let alone, you know, when you're actually like sticking with it for a while.
Yeah.
I think the whole like staying calm, breathing, strategizing, not overreacting, all that stuff. Those are things like core principles that I think when you get deeper into jiu-jitsu or any martial art, you start to see those lessons.
Yeah. I want to almost step back and talk a little bit about your time in M&A, mergers and acquisition, because I have a friend, I'm not going to say who she is, but she works on the finance side of M&A. Okay, so it's really interesting to hear from the law side. And again, I'm not going to give her name, but she says the M&A side, there's a lot of like creative accounting and stuff like that. So, you know, as a lawyer, did you have to see all of that too?
Oh, you know, the stuff that I saw actually, so I got into it thinking that it was going to be really exciting. I thought, you know, we really were working on some deals that were talked about in the Wall Street Journal, some of our public companies. So I was like, this is the highest end of business. I'm just working on the legal side, and it should be so exciting. But in practice, especially being the most junior of the lawyers, and just my particular office, I think was about 70 lawyers. So it was a big office, and internationally, I think we were over 2,000 lawyers.
Wow.
So you're at the bottom of the totem pole, right? So you're getting the work that no one else wants, and you're getting a lot of it. And so I was mostly reviewing. So let's just say company A is buying company B. So, and we represent company A. So our job as lawyers is to try to figure out and predict as many legal issues that we can, so that the company A can make a business decision on whether it's worth paying X amount of dollars for this company. So we would look at things, for example, if company B was a restaurant chain, I would read all of their leases, their actual restaurant leases, and you'll see like those can be 80 pages long, and then they could have 300 locations, right? And they tell you, oh, make sure to keep an eye out for this term. So you have to like look, you're really looking so closely for this stuff, and you're summarizing something. It then gets summarized by someone higher up than you. Again, then gets passed on to the client. So I probably wear glasses now because of all that reading that I did back then, because I wasn't wearing glasses back then. And it was pretty boring, but I got something out of it, which was I read so many contracts and so many different types, and then so many of each of those types that you really started to. It's kind of like learning a new language. I was just reading Spanish all the time, but instead of Spanish, it was like legalese.
Yeah,
Right?
yeah.
So then it helps you in, like, I can now more easily, even though I'm a personal injury lawyer and I don't do this so much now, but I can take a concept or some sort of agreement and I can reduce it to writing into a simple contract, or maybe a more complicated contract if we need to, more effortlessly. It's not effortless, but I could do it much more easier. And yeah, so it wasn't without its own lessons, and I definitely got a lot from it. We didn't see, if there was creative accounting going on, we didn't see it at my level. Maybe it was going on higher
Yeah,
up.
maybe higher up.
But actually, to be honest, the stuff that I saw, they were actually like extremely ethical, and there was a lot of precautions taken to make sure that, for example, if company A is buying company B and we actually represent company B on some other thing, we would have to make sure that no lawyers were working on that. Like, we completely separate the lawyers that were working on the file, and we call it building an ethical wall. So you were not allowed to talk about that stuff. They told us never talk about any work in the elevator or in the lobby or in the back room. Those are common areas. And for example, we were working on a lot of deals that would eventually go public, and if you had access to that, that's literally insider information that could affect trading. So we had to report if we had bought any stocks or family members had bought any stock. We had to constantly fill things out. So I actually saw it as being like hyper ethical, which was also great, because I think you need to get exposed to that early on in your career, so that when you're eventually forced into some decision later that could be questionable, that you have that background and the foundation to know to make the right decision.
Yeah. Wow. That's awesome. And when you decided to go off on your own and you had your two friends and everything, was personal injury the first thing you guys started doing? Or did you guys kind of explore a little bit more before you really went with
so
what you're doing
we were
now?
juggling a few things. And I think it was smart that we did this. It might not have been by choice, but we did it maybe out of necessity. But and I can give you a little bit more specific things, and these are things that any viewers can keep in mind in case it applies to them. So it was really personal injury, and then this bigger umbrella that's called consumer protection. So things that fall into a consumer in the laws of the eye are like people like you and I when we're buying something or we're dealing. We have small transactions with big companies, and there's an imbalance of power there, because, for example, if you were wronged, you might not be able to just take on Nordstrom's. You know, they have some crazy legal team. So the law, and especially California really looks after its citizens and its consumers. The law tries to balance out that imbalance of power by saying, for example, that if you were wronged by let's use lemon law as an example. If you have a new Ford and it's just got all these crazy problems and you have a warranty on there, but they just can't make the repairs, then the law says under lemon law that I'm allowed to represent you if you have a lemon, and the manufacturer has to pay my fee. Because they know that you just don't have money sitting around. You're struggling to make your payments on your car, and especially in times like this, right? This is really when consumer protection means a lot. You don't have the money to go hire lawyers that charge $300-400 an hour to do something that's going to take months, right?
Yeah.
So instead, the law says that if you actually have a case, that the wrongdoer, in this case the manufacturer, has to pay my fee, which is why I love lemon law, because it's especially sweet when you give a client a check and that you're not taking anything out of it. You're getting it separately. So, and you could just see it in their faces. They're extra happy, and it's really nice to be able to not only fix a problem, make sure they're compensated fairly, and then not take a dime from it. And sometimes it sounds too, like I do all of our own advertising, and I have to be careful sometimes in wording things, because I'm like, this actually sounds way too good to be true, and I feel like someone's not going to take it seriously. So I have to give a little bit more context on why that's allowed.
Wow. And I assume it differs by state, right? And probably not every state is as protecting of the consumer as California is.
So that's true. But for example, with lemon law, there's a federal lemon law. And federal law will apply, just in case any of the viewers don't know this, federal law will apply equally, to all 50 states. And then, for example, California will often take these federal laws and put a California twist on it and then add additional protections. So, for example, some other types of law that we would do, the statute was called the Fair Debt Collection Practices Act, so the FDCPA. And California has the RFDCPA. They just added an initial in the front. Not really important what it stands for, but essentially what that is it says that debt collectors have to behave fairly when trying to collect a debt from a consumer. So the most common examples of violations of the FDCPA are, for example, calling your employer to find you to talk about your debt, because that's sensitive, it's private, and it might make your work relationship weird. Your boss might be thinking, why are you getting these kinds of calls? What's going on in your personal life? Who have I hired? Or they can't call you too early, too late. There's actual specific times on when they can't call you. Or you're allowed to write them a letter to say, I understand I owe this money, but I don't want you to contact me to try to collect it. Just send me my statements. And oftentimes they violate that. So they'll continue calling you because they know it's built into their budget, that they know that they can make more money by breaking the law a little bit here because they're not always going to get caught. So they'll still do that. But then we are able to help by taking on that case, again, getting paid from the wrongdoer. In this case, either the debt collector or maybe it's the credit card company or the bank. And oftentimes we're able to actually improve the client's credit score by getting that debt removed as part of the settlement off of their credit. So, and sometimes, for example, each of those violations that I told you, each are worth $1,000 to the consumer. So you can go from having, let's say, $4,000 in credit card debt, and if you've had a handful of violations, now the credit card company owes you money. So oftentimes what we do is we strike up a deal where they'll wipe the debt, they'll take it off your credit, and the chances are if you owe $4,000 on that one credit card and you fell behind, you might have another credit card or another credit card that the same is true. So we try to consolidate all that stuff. And I don't specialize in credit repair by any means, but that's a secondary benefit.
Yeah, almost like a good side effect.
Yeah, exactly. So, and we put that up to the client. Sometimes people their credit's so bad that they don't care and they say, no, I need the cash right now. I have to pay rent or I have kids. So we leave it up to the client on what they want.
Wow. And viewers, I will put this in the description and pinned comments, but this is just a general discussion. I want to make it clear to viewers. Just a general discussion. It's not legal advice. We're just having a good talk. So I just want to make that clear. It's going to go in the description and in the pinned comments so viewers know that.
Yeah, and Jerry, thanks for mentioning that. It's just something that the State Bar makes us say because they don't want, and I can explain the idea behind that. I think that would be useful because you see these disclaimers in commercials all the time. And anytime a lawyer really speaks, the idea is that we don't want someone solely relying on a statement out of context. And then they get into some sort of trouble and then they think, well, this person told me that. So it's really for their benefit more so than it is ours. And also, we don't want people to falsely assume that we've become their lawyer. So, and this might lead into something good. So I love all my clients and I still respect everyone who calls, even if it doesn't work out and they don't turn into a client. But occasionally, as a lawyer, you get these wild calls and you hear these extreme circumstances and they're like talking a million miles an hour and it's a 2-hour story and you can't get a word in. But there's sometimes those protections are good for us too, just because we get some crazy people occasionally.
Totally. I was going to add a quick story about, companies calling your employer. So one time, this was not really related to consumer protection, although maybe it was. I was trying to get a haircut and they were going to charge me $80 for a haircut. So of course I didn't get the haircut, but I wrote them a bad review. I'm like, they're going to try to charge me $80 for a haircut. So this haircut company found my employer and called me. It's like, oh, Jerry left us a bad review. Can you pass me to Jerry? And I was like, whoa, oh, okay. And of course, I wasn't intimidated. My employer laughed at it. But like that, if that went south, that could have been something where like I went to you, but like, Sina, dude, what the heck, man?
It sounds like that company has bigger problems.
Yeah, they probably have bigger management problems.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you want, Jerry, I don't know if it'll be helpful, but I can just give some of the basics of when someone would actually need to hire a personal injury attorney.
Yeah, please, let's do that.
I also have a YouTube channel. I've put out like a 20-minute, I call it the ultimate guide, where it really gives you an intro to all of the major food groups that make up a personal injury case. Mm-hmm. But really just, if I had to boil it down to just a couple sentences, it would be, if you're injured in an accident, the most common accident would be an auto accident, a motorcycle accident, something like that. But it could also be, for example, getting hurt on the premises of like a business, like a slip and fall in a grocery store. Those are also common cases that we see. But if that happens, you should just know that, okay, you've been injured. So you were involved in that accident and you were injured as a result. There's typically insurance involved, and your claim, your potential claim, is worth something. So the more injured you are, the more valuable your claim is. And you really should at least get 1 or 2 consultations from an attorney or attorneys before deciding to try to just handle it on your own. And I say that because I'm biased, obviously, and I can say for a fact that in 90-something% of cases, we will net more money for the client than they will ever be able to do on their own. But I don't want them to make the decision just based off of that. So at least get a free consultation. Any personal injury attorney will always offer you a free consultation. They will not charge you money up front. If we are able to settle a case for you, we get paid on the end of the case as a percentage of the case. So at least get a consultation, understand what your rights are. Because I know if I tell you all of your rights right now, no one's going to actually remember it. But just remember to actually make that phone call. Phone a friend, get a consultation. The earlier you do it, the better, because the system, when I say the system, I'm talking about you dealing with an insurance company. It kind of goes back to how we were talking about that imbalance of power, right? So this is a corporate system structured for profit. And the way they make their profits are by collecting insurance premiums that we all pay if we drive a car, and then not paying out if they can't, or paying less than what they have to when there actually is a claim. So if you think, and sometimes I get this when I have, let's just say smarter clients or more sophisticated clients, or they do something crazy and they're smarter than me anyway, but in a different field. They will think that they can take this process on themselves. But the problem is I've been through it thousands of times. Yeah. And this will, even if they've gone through it twice, that's still nothing. You know, let's just assume I'm an idiot. I still have way more experience when it comes to that. And they will ask, every question they ask is meant to try to get evidence to lower the value of your case. So it's one of those things, it really is, anything you say can and will be used against you. That's the whole process.
Wow.
So you want to consider an attorney early on. After speaking to them, you decide you still want to handle it on your own, great. You haven't lost anything. And you also just want to make sure to get treatment for your injuries, because I'm not a doctor. I won't pretend like I really know what's best for you, but the sooner you get in and the more often you get into treatment, that's going to be what's going to stimulate your physical recovery the best. And then that also, coincidentally, is what helps your case value too. So that's my spiel on personal injury.
Wow. That's awesome. Well, Sina, so let's say if someone gives you a call, are you one of those lawyers that's like, you have a consultation fee, or it's like, it's a free initial consultation? Yeah. Tell me about that.
It's absolutely a free consultation. And like I said, even if you end up hiring me, you don't pay a penny related to your case until the case is completely done. A common fee for a personal injury attorney is going to be 1/3 of the total case value. So 33 1/3%. And that could differ depending on the very specific details of a case, but that's generally what you're going to see. So there's no consultation fee. And then if I can hype myself up, a little humble brag here would be that the difference between me and some other firms is that I spend a lot more time speaking with my clients than other lawyers. So I'm a small firm. So I would consider myself like a boutique law firm.
Mm-hmm.
And I will not take every case that comes through the door because I know that if I do, at some point, I will have to ignore a client's call, or I will have to just lower my customer service. And that's not what has led me to the place that I'm happy to say that I'm at now. So most people end up finding me on Yelp, and I'm happy to say in Santa Monica, Greater West Side, I'll be the #1 search result. So I really take that as like, and I know like the enemy here is even a 4-star review. I want to make sure that I get 5 stars on every single experience. So, and it takes a lot of time to be able to do that. Most average case, I would say, if it's really quick, it's still probably 4 or 5 months. Some cases that are really big, serious injuries, maybe they have some complications, they could take 2 years. So I'm really establishing a relationship with the person, and really just you're basically betting your reputation each time, and knowing that you're going to follow through with it and then get that much back.
Wow. So you also have online brand, you have a YouTube channel. When did you decide to start that?
We were just touching on this a little bit earlier. So I started making videos completely unrelated to law. It was, I think the first time I really did it, I got a decent Canon DSLR, and the same 2 buddies that I had started the law firm with, I guess you could say we went on a law firm trip. We went to Tokyo, and it was like the last minute trip. I got the camera right before, and I shot a bunch of video content, and it's a long plane ride back. So I had everything on my phone, and just with iMovie, I ended up editing like a few minute vacation highlight. And I all of a sudden the plane lands. I was so locked into the editing process, which could take a really long time. I'm sure you kind of can feel my pain there. That I didn't realize that the whole plane ride was over, and I was so engaged in it. So then I realized I liked video editing, and kept doing more. It was usually vacation stuff, fun stuff. And then I started actually just trying to see how I can apply. Maybe I can talk about a legal subject, kind of like how we're doing here. Mm-hmm. And I had a YouTube channel that really just hosted some videos that were embedded on my site. But then it was actually, unfortunately, it was when George Floyd was killed that I thought that, and I was right here in my office, I was walking down the hallway, there's a common area with a TV, and it said that one of the officers was charged with third-degree murder. And I went to law school, I took criminal law, and I just knew that third-degree murder is not something that you always hear of. You hear first and second degree, and there's other types of murder. But third degree I knew was less common because I had to think for a second what it was. And it's really just a different name for something else that we have different names for it in our state. So state to state, the names can vary. And so I just went online and I did a little just homework. It was kind of nice for me just to figure out what exactly it was. And then I decided, okay, my camera is literally right here off of our camera. And I just decided I'm going to talk about this and make it very simple. And I put a lot of effort into making sure that I actually never mentioned George Floyd's name or the officer's name. And I wanted to be not political. I really just wanted to kind of put my law professor hat on and just put it out there because I felt like it was a time I have trouble understanding what information is not slanted or not political. So I wanted to just put something out there and see how people react to that. And that I probably went from having 100 total views on all my videos combined, and that one was I don't know, 10, 15,000-ish, something like that. So I was like, oh, okay, so I'm sure not every video will be like that, but there is some audience out there that cares about different subjects. So I kind of made other little videos on different subjects like aiding and abetting, or different topics that I saw were coming up in the news, just to continue to try to help educate. And then now I've been adding a little bit more to my expertise of personal injury and lemon law. So it's been fun. It takes a lot of time, but because of COVID, unfortunately, work has slowed down a little bit. And so I try to fill in those gaps by staying busy and productive and making these videos.
Yeah, and I think it's great what you're doing, and I definitely want to encourage everyone who watches this, don't just go on social media for the sake of it, but like if you think you have something to show people or you have some value you can add, definitely go for it. Like everyone has a talent that probably someone else can't do as well. I truly believe in that. And I think the key is like before you start a brand, think about not just what you can do, but also what you can do easier than other people. If you can draw like twice as fast as other people, maybe you should do a drawing brand. But like, you don't want to be one of those people who like spends 6 hours on a video and then it's like you just get one video out and then you're like, oh, I'm so tired, right? Like one of the reasons I stumbled on some of my brands is because it just like came easily. Like I could put out a video in 20 minutes. I could put out a video in 10 minutes if I really rush, right? So like that's what gave me the advantage. It's not like, for example, the fight commentary channel that you mentioned, it's not like I'm the best martial artist. I don't even consider myself a good martial artist, but I like talking about it. And, I can watch and react to it. So it worked for me.
Yeah. And I think along those lines, people, myself, I'm speaking for myself. I enjoy watching people who are enthusiastic about a subject, talk about the subject. It could really be like, I don't know, woodworking, or it could be like knitting. It doesn't really matter. It could be anything. I was hearing a discussion about how there's like marble racing videos that are getting like 1 million+ views, and it's mainly because the announcer that's like talking about the marble racing is so enthusiastic. Wow. So I think that kind of, I think people are attracted to enthusiasm.
Yeah, exactly. Sina, what is next for you? Do you think like sticking to lemon law and personal injury law is your thing, or do you think you might expand potentially?
I think that I'm pretty happy where I'm at as far as practice areas, so personal injury and lemon law. And I think it takes a while. So I've been at it for about a decade now. And you often hear that like to gain expertise, it takes somewhere in that range of like 10 years. And it's nice when there's a weird quirk to a case and it's not the first time you've seen it, because then you can really comfort your client and really give good advice. Because and of course I haven't seen it all, and there's attorneys that are more experienced than me, but I think it's really nice having that experience and then being able to work on more complicated cases, which unfortunately for personal injury might mean a more serious injury, or God forbid someone actually passing away. We call that a wrongful death case. And I have had some of those before too. And also just working on building a relationship with the person that comes to you as a stranger, because for example, in those wrongful death cases, I realized pretty quickly that I was filling the role as the most responsible person in this family's life that has now lost someone. So, for example, without getting too much into the detail of a family, both parents are in their early 20s, toddlers as children, and their father has, the man of the household has now passed away, which is just completely devastating, right? It's like, no matter how old someone is when they pass away, especially, but then when it's tragic and it's at a young age, you realize like, oh, this is almost less about the law now, but it's more about kind of keeping this family together, helping them get through the darkest moments that they will. And of course you can't do everything for them, but you can at least be like a silver lining here or there. And I think working on those skills is going to be something that I'm going to have to continue to do. I don't think you'll ever be amazing at it, but I guess it takes some practice to be kind of the shoulder to cry on, or the rock. And then, so there's this whole other like emotional aspect of being a personal injury attorney, that you have to help absorb that from your clients and then help build them back up. Because even though the only thing I could do for them is to collect money for them, it really would be better if I could also help them build back up from where they are.
Yeah. I think one thing I'm really learning from you is just the importance of like empathy, right? That beats the dollar amount always. It's like you understand why you got into this. It's like for people, help people. And I really see that in you.
Yeah. And we haven't even talked about this. So I wouldn't put myself out as being the world's best or most experienced trial attorney. And we can just kind of talk about how your average case does not involve the court. There is no lawsuit filed. Even if a lawsuit does get filed, you're 80% of cases get settled well before it ends up in front of a jury. But once you get in front of a jury, it is a whole new ballgame. You are now doing something completely different. You're basically, and I don't mean to use the word performance to say like you're making stuff up or anything, but you are now putting on a performance for 12 strangers and an alternate juror and the judge. And you're telling the story of what happened to somebody.
Yeah.
Like out of nowhere, out of the blue. And you, the recovery of your client totally depends on how well you're putting on this performance. And it's not just your public speaking skills, but it's also deciding which witness to call first, or what question to not ask someone because maybe they're going to fumble on those words, or how straight you stand in front of the jury, or how polite you are when they walk past you. So it's like, it's all of these things. So empathy is important. And I think jurors can really pick up on that because this quote unquote performance is so brief and so much has happened before. They really are probably going to side with the people that they think are being the most honest and sincere. And I think really kind of working on who you are as a person is important in that setting, because if you're just all aggressive and shouting and pointing, they may just think that this guy's just in it for the money, which always is a factor. And I think it's important to kind of own that. Of course, we're doing this for a living, but you really are trying to get something fair for someone who's gone through an experience that wasn't by choice.
Yeah. Wow. I think it's really interesting. And, you know, I've talked to other lawyers before, and they all say this, basically the same thing. Like most cases either settle, they very rarely go to trial. And I think it's so interesting because I've talked to another lawyer who said, you know, he likes the trial stuff, right? Like, you know, he's a different type of lawyer than what you do, but he likes the trial. So I guess it really depends. Some lawyers, I remember one time back when I lived downtown, I had an office on the 35th floor of one of the buildings, and like these lawyers were coming down as they're working with a client. I was in the elevator with them, and the client was kind of like not that happy. She was like, "Oh man, is it cool to settle?" And the lawyer's like, "Yeah, it's always good to settle." And then because I was in the elevator with them, I'm like, "Yeah, that's what I learned too." You know, I had to chime in, and they're like, "Ooh, how'd you know?" But it's really funny that I think because of how media and everything portrays law, we always see and think about kind of like trial stuff. But a lot of times, if you don't need to get there, sometimes it's better for everyone not to get there.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I would say if I had to guess the percentage of cases that I see actually go to trial, it's less than 5%. And usually that would require there's something that the two sides can see completely different. So the most common case that I have is one person gets rear-ended by another. So we already know whose fault it is. Now the only question is, how injured is this person?
Yeah.
Assuming they've suffered the more common kind of injuries, neck and back pain or whatever it might be, then the insurance company has seen this case a million times before. So have I. We have a general understanding of what the value is. But it's when all of a sudden, let's say it's a minor fender bender, but somebody, for example, hit their head really hard on the back seat rest, and now they have foggy memory and nausea and double vision, and they're having trouble getting their thoughts across, and they get an MRI, and it shows that they actually have like a hematoma on their brain, and their mood has changed now because this is essentially a traumatic brain injury, which affects your like endocrine system, and they're basically now like their life was going this way, but now it's just made a right turn, and they are not going to be the same person that they would have been had this accident not happened.
Yeah.
But the insurance company will say, well, this accident was too minor for that change to have happened. But if the client comes to me and says that's what happened, then I know that's actual reality. So the insurance company thinks the case is going this way, we think the case is going this way, and this divide keeps growing. And that could be a sample or example of a case that ends up going to trial. But we'll still do our very best to avoid that, because trial is, and if I can guess the personality of the person that told you they love trial, they probably get a rush out of it. There is 100% gamble. There's a sense of gambling there, but they must like their hand, and they must be great at what they're doing.
Yeah.
So attorneys like me, I won't put myself in that category. I think I would be disingenuous to say that that's really the type of attorney that I am. But those types of attorneys work well with my type of attorney. So it's typically a team effort, because a trial attorney is going to be too busy in trial to be great at working up your case for the 2 years before trial. So usually what happens is there's some sort of co-counsel relationship, or maybe if it's a big firm, that one firm can do everything in-house. But even then, generally the firm has like a personality, and it's either like pre-trial or trial. And usually those two types of lawyers work together to be able to get a case start to finish across the finish line.
I think it's really interesting talking to you and just talking to other lawyers. I realize more and more that how important it is to kind of have it's like a team effort. It really is a team effort. Even boutique small law firms will often collaborate with other kind of people depending on the circumstances. And it's like, we always make lawyer jokes, but it's almost like the lawyer jokes need to like make fun of lawyer teams, just not just one lawyer. Because you never, if you really, have something, you need help. Rarely it's just one lawyer. That's something I'm learning.
Yeah. I think the law can. I don't know. I love cars, but I don't know how to, for example, work on a car. I can't take apart an engine, put it back together. Even though I do lemon law, which means I know maybe a little bit more about cars than just your average person. But for example, if I take my car to the shop and they tell me I need to get X, Y, and Z replaced, and it's going to cost this much, I think it's natural to think like, do I really need that? Yeah. And then feel the frustration of I actually have no idea what's going on.
Yeah.
And then you're kind of making your decision, at least in part, just on the basis of the trust that you have with the person.
Yeah.
And I think that's why some people who have, for example, a mechanic that they love, they stick with for like 20 years.
Yeah.
Because they just it's all about the trust.
Yeah.
And I think that is once you have that with the client, or once you're the client and you have that with your attorney, then it's really irreplaceable. And I know that as the attorney, it's our job to earn the trust of the client. It's unfair, and there's a lot of attorneys that will just expect that trust, and those are typically the people that don't deserve it.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, this is great. Another kind of interesting analogy I would love to present to people is just people who want to build their own home or want to remodel their home or put a second story or whatever to their one-story home. There's one way to go about it, which is get a general contractor, and then the general contractor gets all the people, right? There's another way, which saves money, which is you could be the general contractor. You could try to find all the people, right? But normally the people that do that, they have so many headaches.
Oh, absolutely.
So I think that analogy I want to apply to what Sina's been teaching us, which is sometimes don't do it yourself, man. Go to the experts, especially with something as complicated as law and personal injury law or lemon law and all that.
Absolutely. I'm going to use your analogy now when I talk to people in the future. And the funny thing is I used to be that person that would try to take on all that stuff myself. And now that I put myself in the shoes of my own clients, and I'm like, okay, if I can at least establish some sort of trust, and that person really gives me a game plan on why their service is worthy of the price that ends up being paid, then I started becoming the person now that is trusting more. So I'm applying that in my life with other professionals.
Yeah, exactly. So Sina, if someone wanted to get in touch with you for a consultation, what's the best way? Do they search your law firm? Do they search your name, or do they just search Santa Monica, personal injury lawyer? What's the best way to get in touch with you?
If I'm doing the SEO stuff right, even if you search for Santa Monica personal injury lawyer, I should be up there. But they can go directly to my website, which is Sina, Sina, Rez, REZ, law.com. And again, anything personal injury related, anything lemon law related, or if after watching this, you just feel like you got to know me a little bit better, but you have a completely different issue, I can at least try to connect you with a friend or a colleague that specializes in what you need. And I often do that. I like to at least be a middleman to the extent I can to help point people in the right direction.
Yeah. And I think that's a very powerful you do, just like business, and not just business wise, just like, you know, relationship wise. It's just like when you know you're not the expert, just like, but I got people that can help you. I think that's what I try to do too. When like people ask me for advice for random things, I'm like, I'm not the expert, but I got someone here. You can talk to them.
Yeah, it's awesome being that person. Growing up, I have, he's still really close to me. He's actually one of my clients now too, but one of my cousins, same age, so we were basically best friends growing up. It didn't matter if we were 12 years old, 20 years old, or now 35. If you needed something done, he was always like, oh, I have a guy for that.
Yeah.
And it's actually nice being, I won't put myself at his level, but it is nice being the person that can help point you in the right direction. And again, like taking someone who's in need of something and helping to fill that need is always satisfying.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Guys, this was Jerry Learns Business. Great conversation with Sina. Dude, Sina, my roommate does jiu-jitsu. My roommate, Rob, you've seen on my channel. Like, he's always looking for people to drill with and stuff.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, dude, it would be so cool to
That'd be awesome.
have
Really
like a community.
having me on here and speaking to you was great. I was like, this should be interesting, but it ended up being like very fun too.
Well, I'm glad. I'm glad, man. Yeah, I try to structure the conversations as like real conversations, and usually they work. So far I've only had one interview I couldn't post. The guy was just the whole time. He's what you would call a masshole. You know, he's from Massachusetts. He has that personality, and I interacted with him later after the interview. I could just tell that guy there's something like there's an issue. It doesn't fit my brand. So that was the only time I had a bad interview. But normally, if people understand, we're just having a conversation. Like it becomes fun.
Yeah, this was actually the first time I've ever done, let's say, like an interview.
Mm-hmm.
And I think you do a great job of making it easy.
Well, thank you.
And
yeah, Sina,
I know we talked about what I was doing, but you're great at what you do.
Well, thank you, man. And this is something I don't know if you're interested in for viewers potentially. In the future, if there's any like big news story about any kind of like this type of like issue, maybe like we could have Sina as a guest or something to kind of like be like, oh, this is what, if you guys don't understand what's going on, this is what's going on kind of thing.
Yeah, absolutely. I would love to. And I always ask people or encourage people to like leave the question in the comment section, because I can come up with a topic myself, but I'd much rather it be something that people actually want to see answered. So that's a great idea. I would love to participate.
Yeah. So viewers, I will put Sina's website and I'll put his YouTube channel and everything. And we'll definitely have Sina back.
Cool. Thanks, Jeremy.